Reading through the Bible in 1 year, August 9th, Ruth chapter 2, Acts 27, Jeremiah 37, and Psalm chapter 10. Now Naomi had a kinsman of her husband, a kinsman redeemer, a mighty man of excellence, of the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, "Please let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain after one whom I may find favor in his eyes." And she said to her, "Go, my daughter." So she went, and she came and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And so it happened that she happened to come to the portion of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the family of Elimelech. Now behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem and said to the reapers, "May Yahweh be with you." And they said to him, "May Yahweh bless you." Then Boaz said to his young man who was in charge of the reapers, Whose young woman is this?" The young man in charge of the reapers replied, "She is the young Moabite woman who returned with Naomi from the fields of Moab." And she said, "Please let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves." Thus she came and has remained from the morning until now, and she has been sitting in the house for a little while. Then Boaz said to Ruth, "Have you not heard, my daughter? Do not go to glean in another field. Furthermore, do not go on from this one, but stay here with my young women. Let your eyes be on the field which they reap, and go after them. Indeed, I have commanded the young men not to touch you. And if you are thirsty, go to the water jars and drink from what the young men draw." And she fell on her face, bowing to the ground, and said to him, "Why have I found such favor in your sight that you should take notice of me, though I am a foreigner?" And Boaz replied to her, "All that you have done for your mother-in-law after the death of your husband has been fully told to me, and how you forsook your father and your mother and the land of your birth, and came to a people that you did not previously know. May Yahweh fully repay your work, and may your wages be full from Yahweh, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to seek refuge." Then she said, May I find favor in your eyes, my lord, for you have comforted me, and have indeed spoken to the heart of your servant woman, though I am not like one of your servant women." At mealtime Boaz said to her, "Come here, so that you may eat of the bread and dip your piece of bread in the vinegar." So she sat beside the reapers, and he served her roasted grain, and she ate and was satisfied, and had some left. Then she rose to glean, and Boaz commanded his young men, saying, "Let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not dishonor her. Also, you shall purposely pull out for her some grain from the bundles, and leave it for her so that she may glean, and do not rebuke her." So she gleaned in the field until evening. Then she beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. She took it up and went into the city, and her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned. And she took it out and gave Naomi what she had left after she was satisfied. And her mother-in-law said to her, "Where did you glean today, and where did you work? May he who took notice of you be blessed." So she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked, and said, "The name of the man with whom I worked today is Boaz." Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "May he be blessed of Yahweh, who has not forsaken his loving kindness to the living and to the dead." Then Naomi said to her, "The man is our relative. He is one of our kinsmen redeemers." Then Ruth the Moabitess said, "Furthermore, he said to me, 'You should stay close to my young men until they have finished all my harvest.'" Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, "It is good, my daughter, that you go out with his young men," with his young women, "so that others do not oppress you in another field." So she stayed close to the young women of Boaz in order to glean until the end of the barley harvest and the wheat harvest, and she lived with her mother-in-law. And that's all the notes to here. Let's go on to Acts chapter 27. Now, when it was decided that we should set sail for Italy, They proceeded to deliver Paul and some of the other prisoners to a centurion of the Augustan cohort named Julius. And getting aboard an I always get this one, Adramyttian ship. Yep, I think I got it that time. Which is about to set sail to the regions along the coast of Asia. We set sail, accompanied by Aristarchus, a Macedonian of Thessalonica. The next day we put in at Sidon, and Julius treated Paul with consideration, and allowed him to go to his friends and receive care. From there we set sail and sailed under the shelter of Cyprus, because the winds were against us. When we had sailed through the sea along the coast of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we landed at Myra in Lycia. There, the centurion found an Alexandrian ship sailing for Italy, and he put us aboard it. But we had sailed slowly for a good many days, and with difficulty had arrived off Cnidus. Since the wind did not permit us to go farther, we sailed under the shelter of Crete off Salmone. And with difficulty we sailed past it and came to a place called Fair Havens, near which was the city of Lasea. And when considerable time had passed, and the voyage was now dangerous, since even the fast was already over, Paul began to advise them, and said to them, Men, I perceive that the voyage will certainly be with damage and great loss, not only of the cargo in the ship, but also of our lives. But the centurion was being more persuaded by the pilot and the captain of the ship than what was being said by Paul. And because the harbor was not suitable for wintering, the majority reached a decision to set sail from there, if, somehow, they could arrive at Phoenix, a harbor of Crete facing southwest and northwest, to spend the winter there. And when a moderate south wind came up, thinking they had attained their purpose, they weighed anchor and began sailing along the shore of Crete. But before very long there rushed down from the land a violent wind called Euraquilo, or northeaster. And when the ship was caught in it and could not face the wind, we gave way to it and let ourselves be carried along. And running under the shelter of a small island called Claudia, we were scarcely able to get the ship's boat under control. This is a secondary boat, not the boat itself. And after they had hoisted it up, they used supporting cables in undergirding the ship, fearing that they might run aground on the shallows of Syrtis. And they let down the sea anchor, and in this way let themselves be carried along. The next day, we were being violently storm-tossed. They began to jettison cargo. And on the third day, they cast the ship's tackle overboard with their own hands. And since neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, and no small storm was assailing us, from then on, all hope of our being saved was gradually abandoned. And when they had gone some time without food, then Paul stood up in their midst and said, Men, you ought to have followed my advice not to set sail from Crete and to avoid this damage and loss. And now I advise you to be cheerful, for there will be no loss of life among you, but only of the ship. For this very night an angel of the God to whom I belong and whom I serve stood before me, saying, Do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand before Caesar, and behold, God has granted you all those who are sailing with you. Therefore, be cheerful, men, for I believe God that it will turn out exactly as I have been told. But we must run aground on some island. But when the 14th night came, as we were being carried about in the Adriatic Sea, about midnight, the sailors began to suspect that some land was approaching them. When they took soundings, they found it to be 20 fathoms. A little farther on, they took another sounding and found it to be 15 fathoms. And fearing that we might run aground somewhere on the rocks, they cast 4 anchors from the stern and were praying for daybreak. But as the sailors were trying to escape from the ship and had let down the ship's boat into the sea on the pretense of intending to lay out anchors from the bow, Paul said to the centurion and to the soldiers, Unless these men remain in the ship, you yourselves cannot be saved. Then the soldiers cut away the ropes of the ship's boat and let it fall away. Until the day was about to dawn, Paul was encouraging them all to take some food, saying, Today is the 14th day that you have been constantly watching and going without eating, having taken nothing. Therefore I encourage you to take some food. This is for your own salvation, for not a hair of the head of any of you will perish." And having said all these things, he took bread and gave thanks to God in the presence of all, and he broke it and began to eat. And all of them became cheerful, and they themselves also took food. And all of us in the ship were 276 persons. When they had eaten enough, they began to lighten the ship by throwing out the wheat into the sea. Now, when day came, they could not recognize the land, but were noticing a bay with a beach. They were resolving to drive the ship onto it if they could. And casting off the anchors, they left them in the sea, while at the same time were loosening the ropes of the rudders, and hoisting the foresail to the wind. They were heading for the beach. But striking a reef where the two seas met, they ran the vessel aground, and the bow stuck fast and remained immovable. But the stern began to be broken up by the force of the waves. Now the soldiers' plan was to kill the prisoners, so that none of them could swim away and escape. But the centurion, wanting to bring Paul safely through, kept them from their intention, and ordered that those who could swim should jump overboard first and get to land, and the rest should follow on some planks, and others on various things from the ship. And so it happened that they were all brought safely to land. Now Jeremiah 37. Now Zedekiah, the son of Josiah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had made king in the land of Judah, reigned as king in place of Coniah, the son of Jehoiakim. But neither he nor his servants nor the people of the land listened to the words of Yahweh, which he spoke through Jeremiah the prophet. Yet King Zedekiah sent Jehukal, the son of Shelemiah, and Zephaniah, the son of Maaseiah the priest, to Jeremiah the prophet, saying, "Please pray to Yahweh, our God, on our behalf." Now Jeremiah was still coming in and going out among the people, and they had not yet put him in the prison. Meanwhile, Pharaoh's military force had come out from Egypt, and the Chaldeans, who had been besieging Jerusalem, heard the report about them, so they withdrew from Jerusalem. Then the word of Yahweh came to Jeremiah the prophet, saying, "Thus says Yahweh, the God of Israel. Thus you are to say to the king of Judah, who sent you to me to inquire of me, Behold, the military force of Pharaoh, which has come out for your assistance, is going to return to his own land of Egypt. The Chaldeans will also return and fight against this city, and they will capture it and burn it with fire. Thus says Yahweh, do not deceive yourselves, saying, the Chaldeans will surely go away from us, for they will not go. For even if you had struck down the entire military force of the Chaldeans who were fighting against you, and there were only wounded men remaining among them, each man in his tent, they would rise up and burn this city with fire. Now it happened when the military force of the Chaldeans had withdrawn from Jerusalem because of the military force of Pharaoh, that Jeremiah went out from Jerusalem to go to the land of Benjamin in order to obtain his portion of some property there among his people, or among the people. This was already referred to back in, is it going to show me? Jeremiah 32. We talked about this ahead of time. Now it happened that while he was at the gate of Benjamin, the master of the guard, whose name was Irijah, the son of Shelemiah, the son of Hananiah, was there. And he seized Jeremiah the prophet, saying, you are going over to the Chaldeans. But Jeremiah said, a lie. I am not going over to the Chaldeans. Yet he would not listen to him. So Irijah seized Jeremiah and brought him to the officials. Then the officials were angry at Jeremiah and struck him. And they put him in jail in the house of Jonathan the scribe, because they had made that house into the prison. For Jeremiah had come to the pit, that is, the vaulted cell, and Jeremiah stayed there many days. Then King Zedekiah sent and took him out. And in his palace, the king secretly asked him and said, is there a word from Yahweh? And Jeremiah said, There is. Then he said, You will be given into the hand of the king of Babylon. Moreover, Jeremiah said to King Zedekiah, In what way have I sinned against you, or against your servants, or against this people, that you have put me in prison? Where then are your prophets who prophesy to you, saying, The king of Babylon will not come against you or this land? But now, please listen, O my lord the king. Please let my supplication come before you, and do not make me return to the house of Jonathan the scribe, that I may not die there. Then King Zedekiah gave commandment, and they committed Jeremiah to the court of the guard, and gave him a loaf of bread daily from the baker street, until all the bread in the city had come to an end. So Jeremiah remained in the court of the guard. Concluding today in Psalm chapter 10. Why do you stand far off, O Yahweh? Why do you hide yourself in times of distress? In his lofty pride, the wicked hotly pursues the afflicted. Let them be caught in the thoughts which they have devised. For the wicked boasts of his soul's desire, and the greedy man curses and spurns Yahweh. The wicked, in the haughtiness of his countenance, does not seek him. All his thoughts are, There is no God. His ways prosper at all times. Your judgments are on high, out of his sight. As for all his adversaries, he snorts at them. He says in his heart, I will not be shaken. From generation to generation, I will not be in adversity. His mouth is full of curses and deceit and oppression. Under his tongue is mischief and wickedness. He sits in the places of the villages where one lies in wait. In the hiding places, he kills the innocent. His eyes stealthily watch for the unfortunate. He lies in wait in a hiding place as a lion in his lair. He lies in wait to catch the afflicted. He catches the afflicted when he draws him into his net. He crouches, he bows down, and the unfortunate fall by his mighty ones. He says in his heart, God has forgotten. He has hidden his face. He will never see it. Arise, O Yahweh, lift up your hand. Do not forget the afflicted. Why has the wicked spurned God? He has said in his heart, You will not require it. You have seen it, for you have beheld mischief and vexation to take it into your hand. The unfortunate commits himself to you. You have been the helper of the orphan. Break the arm of the wicked and the evildoer. Seek out his wickedness until you find none. Yahweh is king forever and ever. Nations have perished from his land. O Yahweh, you have heard the desire of the humble. You will strengthen their heart. You will cause your ear to give heed, to give justice to the orphan and to the oppressed, so that man who is of the earth will no longer cause terror. That's it. That's all the text and all of the notes for today. God willing, we'll be back tomorrow. Behold, the word of the Lord.